didn't want to like see people. I didn't want people to see me. If I did go out anywhere, I'd cover up as much as possible. So I'd wear a hat. I was having my chemotherapy throughout the summer, so I'd wear sunglasses. I'd wear a hat, um, just covering my face as much as I could. Looking back on it now, I wish I didn't do that. But at the time, I just didn't like how I looked. It's almost like a loss of identity. My name's Dylan. I am from the UK. I was born and raised in London. I was diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 25 years old. I actually found out on my 25th birthday about it, funnily enough. Yeah, currently I'm a women's health coach, so I have my own coaching business. Married, have my amazing wife, and we have a almost 1.5-year-old daughter, which is fun. The symptoms I remember the most, I had like severe night sweats, which, I mean, I used to wake up 2 to 3 times. At the worst, I used to wake up 2 to 3 times every night with my clothes drenched. My bed was drenched. I'd have to change my sheets, change my clothes. Um, I just honestly thought I was getting really hot at the time. I am someone like I sleep with a fan on pretty much whether it's summer or winter. So I just thought that's just me. I get hot a lot. So night sweats were predominant. I had really itchy skin. Like I remember my legs especially used to itch really bad, like to the point I'd scratch them till they bled. Um, I used to carry like a little tub of body lotion around with me. So I just thought I was getting dry skin because of the weather change, etc. So I used to carry this tub of body lotion around, and I'd kind of rub that on my legs throughout the day. So I think those two were probably the ones that stick to my mind the most, and were kind of around pretty much every single day. I was like severely fatigued as well, but then I kind of put that down to I was working a lot. I used to work ridiculous hours, so I just thought I'm not resting enough. Plus, where I was waking up multiple times throughout the night with the night sweats, I just thought I'm not getting good sleep. So it makes sense as to why I'm so tired. And then I did have some lumps. I had some lumps on my neck, which one of my friends actually pointed out to me, and he was like, "What is that on your neck?" And I kind of felt it, and it was really firm. So I used to go to the gym quite a lot back then, so I just assumed it was like me growing some muscles somehow, like around there. But you can tell, like, I was putting it down to something. I had an explanation in my mind of why these things were happening, and then I actually found a lump in my armpit, which prompted me to go to the doctors to actually get it checked out. And as soon as she felt the lump in my armpit, she felt around my neck, obviously felt all the bumps there, and straight away just didn't really say much. She just went onto her computer and she printed out a form, and at the top of it, it just said cancer referral form. And that's the first time I ever associated cancer with me. I was sent to see a hematologist. The hematologist like kind of poked and prodded, and they sent me for quite an extensive blood test. So the blood they took about, can't remember how much it was now. It was 8 to 12 vials of blood basically, and we're doing multiple tests on it. They took so much blood to the point that I remember after that appointment, I felt very faint. I was kind of just, my friend came with me, and I was sitting in his car just kind of staring at the clouds going by, just spaced out. So they took quite a lot of blood, and then started the process of, I had a biopsy, which was a surgical one. So they basically cut my armpit open and took a part of that out, the bump that I had there. They did a CT scan, a PET scan, some more blood work. And then, so that was all done between the 2nd and the 25th of March. So about a month after my initial visit to the doctors, that's when I got my staging. So that's when they said, yep, so it's stage 4B Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had 3 tumors in my neck, 2 on one side, 1 on the other. I had the one in my armpit, and the reason it was stage 4 was it had spread to my lungs. So I had a tumor, quite a big tumor in my lung. You know, when you see in like TV or movies when someone gets a cancer diagnosis and everything just goes silent, that's pretty much what happened. I heard the word cancer, and everything was just quiet at that moment. I think you end up having so many things going through your mind that it almost just blanks out. So initially, I didn't really have any thoughts. I was just, yeah, it was just a blank mind at the moment they told me. And then I think you go away and you process everything, right? I think initially, one of the first thoughts I had was, am I going to die now? Because people, anytime you hear the word cancer, you naturally think of death, which now I understand is very different. But at the time, that's all I knew about it. So I thought, okay, am I going to die now? Because I'm very young. Then you start thinking, and I remember I kind of racked my brain trying to think of why and how this is happening. So I was like, where did I get this cancer from? What caused it? And I mean, to this day, I still don't 100% know, right? But you try and really figure out how did this come about almost. And then it kind of just sprung to, well, what's the treatment then? And what are the chances of me having a successful treatment? What does this mean for my life going forward? I think there's so many thoughts that kind of run through your head at that point. The treatment was primarily chemotherapy, and they said they were going to try the chemo first. If my body responds well to that, then that's all it will be. At the worst case, potentially radiotherapy after that. So chemotherapy was the first one. So that lasted 6 months, and I was having a chemotherapy session every 2 weeks. So there were 12 sessions in total. So they count that as 6 rounds. They count one round as 2 treatments. So it was 6 rounds, 12 sessions, which lasted 6 months. In terms of side effects, I mean, first off, chemotherapy was just horrible. It was. It's hard to describe it to someone. It's almost like it's killing all of the cancer cells, but it's also killing everything else inside of you, all the good stuff too. So in terms of side effects, there are so many. I probably can't even remember all of them now. Obviously, the main ones were losing my hair, like literally lost. You lose hair from places you don't even realize why it's important. Like my eyelashes were gone, and you don't realize how important your eyelashes are until you don't have them. Because I'd wake up in the mornings and my eyes would be like stuck together, and I'd have to like use my fingers to pull them apart. So you realize that eyelashes are stopping them from doing that. So yeah, I just lost hair literally all over my whole body. I was pretty hairless at that point. I had a massive beard at the time. Like I had a full-on grown beard at the time. So it was a big change. I feel like it's very individual, right? I feel like most people would think men might not care about it as much as women might, but I think for me personally, yeah, it had a massive effect on me. I was at that point I was a very confident person, and I feel like once I lost all of my hair, that confidence just took a massive nosedive. I didn't want to like see people. I didn't want people to see me. If I did go out anywhere, I'd cover up as much as possible. So I'd wear a hat. I was having my chemotherapy throughout the summer, so I'd wear sunglasses. I'd wear a hat, um, just covering my face as much as I could. Looking back on it now, I wish I didn't do that. But at the time, I just didn't like how I looked. It's almost like a loss of identity. You don't really recognize yourself anymore. Like you look in the mirror and you're like, who is this person looking back at me? And I think it kind of just really strips you down to your core. And you feel very exposed, very vulnerable at that point. And it's exactly how I felt. And I never really wanted to see people. This is going to sound so bad, but I remember people would come to see me. I used to live with my parents at the time, so people would come to like my parents' house to see me, like family, friends, or relatives, or whoever. And there were times I actually pretended to be asleep just so I didn't have to see anyone or speak to anyone. And I know might sound really silly, but there were just certain days where you just don't want to be around anyone, if that makes sense. You just I feel like chemotherapy just kind of takes the life out of you. So I mean, I'd just fall asleep sitting there randomly throughout the day. You're just tired all of the time. Um, my nails went black, so my fingernails especially went black, and then my toenails started to go black. So again, that kind of linking in with what I just said about the hair side of things, when you've got like really, like they're literally black nails, it looks kind of weird. So I remember when I used to go out, I'd almost like hide my hands so people can't see my nails. I had like really bad like stinging in my mouth, almost like you get ulcers, and like even drinking water would sting. My throat would close up, so I used to find it hard to eat things and swallow food. Taste buds went completely, could not really taste anything, so you don't really feel like eating when you can't taste. It's you're basically just going off texture, and that's not fun. So I wasn't eating as much as I probably would have liked to. Uh, I think digestion. I felt like chemo really affected my digestion. I felt really clogged up, or my body couldn't properly process and digest certain foods. I remember that taking a bit of a knock. Uh, it wasn't a side effect of the chemo, but they had given me steroids to take at the time. So as a side effect of the steroids, I got really like puffy in my face, which again linked back to the whole confidence side of things. Nausea was really bad. Literally felt like throwing up every single day. I think the only other one I can really remember is one of my veins collapsed at the time. So I didn't have a port. I was having my chemotherapy through an IV drip. So they'd obviously put it into my vein in my hand and then pass it through me like that. And because of how much they'd used all my veins, essentially, had taken such a battering that at one point one of the veins collapsed, and I just woke up in the middle of the night in like excruciating pain down my arm. Could not figure out what it was, and they said if there is anything like you're worried about, just come straight to the hospital and we can check you out. So I just went straight there, and they did a scan on it, and they were like, yeah, basically your veins collapsed. So that was really painful. That was a different kind of pain that I've never experienced. I was technically in remission after my third chemotherapy session. So they did my third one, and then they sent me for a scan at that point, at which they said there are no visible cancer cells showing anymore. So technically, you're in remission, because that's all remission is, right? It's when there is no live cancer in your body at that point. But they said you still need to have the 9 other sessions. We still need to finish the course of treatment. So yeah, remission was actually quite early on, but then I still had to do the treatment. Upon finishing the treatment, I remember when I had my last chemotherapy session, it was very weird because they don't really tell you anything at that point. Like I had my last session, I went in, had the IV, had it all, just like every other time, and then they're just like, okay, bye, and you kind of just walk out of there, and you're just kind of like, is that it? Am I done now? Like, what was that? So it was really weird. No one tells you anything, or at that point, no one told me anything. It was just like, okay, see you later now. So that was really strange to kind of wrap your head around, because it's like you've just gone through all of this in the last 6 months, and it's a very intense process, mentally, emotionally, physically. So at the end of it, you're kind of like, what happens now, sort of thing. So that was a weird day. And then after that, they send you for a few more scans, and then they finally told me, yeah, it's all clear basically, and what we're going to do now is check you. I think at that time it was once every 3 months. So that carried on for the first 6 years. It was supposed to be 5, but they wanted to just keep me on for an extra year just to be sure. So they kept me on for 6 years, checking me up like that. And then at the 6 year point, they said, this is when we now treat you as quote unquote cured. So now you don't really have any more checkups after that. When people hear of your story, they're like, "Oh my God, you're so strong. I don't know how you did it, etc." And I feel like when it's actually happening to you, you don't really have a choice at that point. You 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 go into almost like a fight or flight, and that's the response that you have. And I kind of just went with fight. And mentally, I feel like at the beginning, I surprised myself with just how strong I could be. But I think as the chemotherapy went on and it got tougher, there were a few things I started doing. So that's the first time in my life ever that I started meditating, which I still do to this day. and I feel like that helped a lot. I remember I used to do a lot of breath work. Uh, that helped a lot. It's when I first ever started journaling and writing things down. Prior to this, I was never the person to do anything like that. I never really even paid attention to my mental well-being, but I feel like those things really helped me at the time. And then I just did things that I actually enjoyed and would make me happy. So, for example, really random, but when I was younger, I used to sketch a lot and I used to draw a lot. And as we get older and life takes over, we kind of stop doing these things. So I remember where I just had all of this free time where I was off work having my chemotherapy. I started drawing and sketching again, which I think mentally helps just keep me occupied a bit as well. Because yeah, when you have nothing to do all day every day, you can go a bit crazy. They said with chemotherapy, it could potentially make it so that you aren't able to have children, which is why they gave me the option of freezing it. I did ask them, like, what happens then? Do after I finish my treatment, do I come back and we check if I'm able to have kids or not? And they just said no. When the time happens and you're trying to have children, if you're able to, then brilliant, you have kids. If you're having trouble having kids, then you'd come and see us and we'd figure out what the best option would be. We were completely fine. Life's good. I can't complain. Weirdly enough, I always say having cancer was one of the best things to ever happen to me, which sounds really crazy, but um, I feel like how I was living before, I was not really happy with my life, whereas now I don't take life for granted so much. So I'm living it the fullest way that I can. So yeah, it's amazing now. I think in terms of it being in the back of your mind, I don't think it ever really leaves you completely. I don't. I wouldn't say I think about it as much anymore, but there are times where I'll still like poke around on my neck and make sure nothing's going on there. Or I remember a few years back we went on a holiday, and I had loads of like mosquito bites, and that caused my lymph nodes to swell up a bit. And obviously, I panicked at that point because I felt around my neck and the bumps were like a lot bigger, and I was like, "Oh my god, what's going on here?" So I think there are times where you will worry. I think that's normal. And I guess even after treatment, when I was having my checkups, every time before you'd go for a checkup, there'd be that little bit of worry or anxiety, like, is there going to be bad news or is it going to be fine? So I feel like that's always going to linger because I feel like having cancer is quite a traumatic experience for anyone. Um, and I don't think, like, just going off my own self, like I mentioned earlier, after having my last chemotherapy session, no one told me anything. They kind of just send you on your way. They don't really. I don't know if they do it now, but back then there wasn't as much importance on mental health either. So I was never offered, for example, any counselling or anything in case I had struggled to deal with it. So I feel like, yeah, it's always going to be there for me anyway. It's always going to be in my mind, but I've tried to use it more as a reminder as to how I should live my life now, rather than living in fear that it's going to come back one day. Cancer doesn't have to define you or your life. I think you can go on, like I said, and live an amazing life. It doesn't necessarily have to be the one thing that changes it for the worst. It can also change it for the better. You have to almost trust in it and trust that things will be okay. At the time, it can seem really daunting. It can seem very overwhelming, especially when you receive a cancer diagnosis. But I think just trusting that it will be okay and it can be okay. And I think that's one of the things I had to keep telling myself on my journey. Like, I will get through this. And I feel like, honestly, that helped me so much in terms of dealing with it mentally and just believing in, this is the process, this is what I have to go through, and I will come out of this, and I will be bigger and better than I ever was before, almost. It was almost just like a pause in my life at that time. And then once that was over, it was all going to be amazing again, and that's what's happened. So yeah, I'd say just trust in the process and just believe that it will be okay. A cancer diagnosis doesn't mean death, like what I thought back then.